And hi again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Donovan and Dino here on WKYC.com. It's the Playoff Victory Monday edition of the show with the voice of the Browns, Jimmy Donovan. I'm Dave DeNatale. And Jimmy, we've had some time now, since last night and since everything took place. I know you said last night this might be one of the most significant wins in the history of the Browns franchise, but maybe even since the merger, I would argue maybe it is the most.
Boy, I tell you, Dino, it has to be right up there. It's an amazing feat that they pulled off, considering the week that they had leading up to the game and even the week and a half before the week leading up to the game. The amount of people that they didn't have available for the game, including their head coach and very, very important people on his staff, and then key players who you would expect to be a very, very important part of any game, certainly a playoff game, and definitely trying to pull off a win against the Steelers over at Heinz Field. With all of that missing, the way they went out and won the game is a story that will live in infamy in Browns history because it is just an amazing tale of just unbelievable circumstances that they overcame and really pulled off one of the great wins, I think, in their franchise history. And I know they've had a rich franchise with Paul Brown and through the eras, and definitely in the Hammer and the kids. But this is really something. They make movies about stuff like this.
Yeah, it felt like science fiction during last night. I mean, you and I talked about the importance of avoiding those momentum changing plays, whether it was a pick six or anything like that. All of those things happened for the Browns against Pittsburgh early in the first quarter and in the first half. And, the Browns, to their credit, took advantage of every single of those momentum changing moments that happened in the game.
Yeah, they really did. I know that they want to win the turnover battle, but good heavens, it was just rich and plentiful last night. It was unbelievable how that happens. And we've talked about that in the past. Sometimes when you get turnovers, you can go through a dry spell and you're not getting them. And then, in the blink of an eye, in one game, you can have what happened last night. So it was very timely that it happened. And when it happened too, because I think the Steelers probably felt this way. I'll go play a little psychiatrist with them. I think they probably took a look at the game and said, hey, listen, a week ago, we went over to Cleveland in a game that the Browns had to win at their stadium. We played our second stringers and in some cases our third stringers. And really, we're right there with them, could have taken the game into overtime. And who knows, maybe would have even won the game. We put Big Ben back in there, Marquise Pouncey, TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, and some other people back into the lineup, and we're at home, and we should be fine. And I think that they always feel anyway that Big Ben is going to have big, big games against the Browns because history tells you that's what has happened since he came into the league. And the other thing, I think they feel very confident against the Browns over at Heinz Field. I mean, they've only won once over there until last night. So I think that was the mindset of the Steelers going into the game. And I think the Browns caught them early, and really, they were far more the team ready to play than the Steelers were. The Steelers were had cobwebs. I mean, they really were kind of waking up after a long winter's nap or something like that. And I really think that the Browns just really put it right on them. And if you go back, it was really like the Tennessee game, kind of like the Dallas game, those road games where they just went in right away and put it on that home team. And built up a huge lead. And that's what they did in those other games too, and hung on to win. So I think it was amazing. The start of the game for the Steelers and conversely, the start of the game for the Browns.
And of course, like you mentioned, in those earlier games, Tennessee, Dallas, the Browns saw the lead get whittled down and whittled down and whittled down. And at one point it's 35-23. And, social media is going crazy because everybody's like, oh no, we've seen this movie before. We know what's happened to teams in the past. But if we ever needed a reminder that this is a new team with a new culture, Jimmy, I just thought that touchdown drive that culminated in the Chubb touchdown, but really started with getting the ball to Jarvis Landry.
Yeah.
To me, that said everything about Baker Mayfield and about this Cleveland Browns team?
You know, you hit it right on the head. I really think when in trouble, you go to Landry. Landry's a tough guy, Dino, and I really believe this. I believe in that Jets game where all of the wide receivers were out because of the COVID protocols. I think if they had only had Landry, if all of the other guys remained out, but they had Landry for the game, I think they would have won the game. I think they would have been okay. He is that important to Baker Mayfield and to the team. And when things get a little sticky, you go to Landry. When it got a little tight down in Tennessee, they went to Landry and get a couple of key first downs and kind of open the field up and get their offensive mojo going once again. But I mean, it really did get nerve-wracking, and I'm with the people on social media. I have seen that play a lot over at Heinz Field. I really have. And if you only use the one example, and it was the last time the Browns were in the playoffs, and the game was over in Pittsburgh. They had a big lead over in the game, and suddenly the Steelers started to get going, and the Browns couldn't stop them. Same kind of situation. Couldn't get past pressure. Pass rush pressure, couldn't stop the Steeler wide receivers, and it was the same thing last night. The difference here is you're right. There was a bend and possibility of breaking point in the game, and they didn't break this time around, and that was key. Mayfield was much better. He was terrific all night long. They went to the right guys. Landry was very involved. The tight end, Hooper, but it really does. When they're in trouble, the bailout guy is Landry.
And boy, he came up when they needed him. I just thought when they got that first down, I know I breathed a sigh of relief. Like, okay, it's not going to be another 3 and out. Let's see what they can do. The other thing that made last night's win so remarkable to me, you didn't have your head coach there, and you mentioned the assistants and Kevin Stefanski and Denzel Ward wasn't there, Bill Callahan, I mean, on and on. But the patchwork offensive line that they had to go through that got worse as the game progressed because Conklin got hurt. And then, Dunn gets hurt. I mean, it was remarkable that the Browns were able to have the success they did early on, the push they got on Pittsburgh's defense early, and also protected Baker Mayfield against the team that had the most sacks in the NFL coming in.
Yeah, they had 56 coming into the game, and he did not get sacked last night. And you're right, they had to maneuver a lot of things as the game went deeper into the game because of more injuries along the offensive line. So I think Ryan Cordell did a great job stepping in for the second week in a row, running the offensive line with Bill Callahan and Scott Peters being back in Cleveland because of the COVID situation. This is just amazing when you talk about what they had to do with their coaching staff. Never mind strategically what they had to do with the game, but what they had to do with their coaching staff. People coaching in positions, that are secondary to them. They were without their defensive backs coach. Callie Brownson is running the tight ends because Drew Petzing is out. It's amazing. But back to the offensive line. First of all, I have to tell you, that guy Dunn he played a great game up until the time he was injured, and he really did a great job. Now, he really hadn't played hardly at all in the NFL. He had been in a number of stops, but I mean, nothing that added up to even a full quarter of play as NFL experience-wise. I mean, he was in the AAF, he was in the XFL, and that was amazing, the job that he did. And, you knew the Steelers were going to identify that. It was no secret that Bitonio was going to be out and that the Browns were going to have a new left guard in there, and they're going to target that. There's no doubt about it. And he handled that really, really well. So they did a great job there. I think that, first of all, I think J.C. Tretter becomes so important and more important as the weeks go along because he's so smart and he's such a leader on the field. I mean, you can coach up until the time that you send them out on the field, and then they have to become players. But Tretter is such a leader and such an intelligent player at the center position that he kind of coaches when he's out in the field. Really, I think that he could draw a salary right now, a part-time salary, kind of a consultant salary for the Browns for what he's doing with Bill Callahan and the other offensive line coaches being out for what he's doing out on the field. He's holding them together right now. So an amazing job done by their offensive line, because that was one of the points where I think people worried. Bitonio not being in there and then not even thinking that Conklin would leave the game at some point and Kendall Lamb would have to come in and play right tackle. But just with Bitonio out, that was a real concern going into the game.
Man, it worked out all right for the Browns. As the game was winding down on the NBC call, if people had a chance to watch it on Channel 3, they zoomed in on the field on Jimmy Haslam, and also I think Andrew Berry was next to him. And I found myself just a moment trying to, do a little empathy, put myself in the mind of Jimmy Haslam, what this must mean to him and Dee and their family, all the years of struggle trying to put something together for about 8 years of ownership, and just finally see it really start to come to fruition, and to win that first playoff game of the expansion era in Pittsburgh of all places. I have to just imagine, Jimmy, just you have the perspective, you've covered this team for so long, to know that they're finally got things in the right direction and it's paying off has got to be rewarding for everybody in that family.
Oh, I think so. And remember, they were minority owners of the Steelers. So, I mean, right. they kind of grew up in the NFL, kind of learning under the Rooney watch and ownership over there in Pittsburgh. But as I always told you, a minority owner in that kind of situation gets you a nice seat for the game and some pretty good parking. I don't think that you're involved in drafting or what they're going to do in free agency or if they're going to keep Big Ben around. But anyway, having said that, they kind of learned the ropes a little bit. But I think there was a point, Dino, that very, very frustrating that they could get this turned around. I think they were embarrassed because it's such a public thing to own a franchise, and certainly to own the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. It really is, because everybody is in your business 365 days a year. I mean, the Browns are news 365 days a year. What are they going to do? What are they going to do in the offseason? What are they going to do? What kind of uniforms are they going to wear? What are they going to do for training camp? I mean, it's just it's a nonstop thing. It's 24/7. And I think there was a point in time where they probably looked at this and went, wow, we have been major successful in our business ventures. I mean, we have both Dee on her side in her production company, and obviously Jimmy with the family business being Pilot Flying J. I mean, I think that, that they've been certainly just incredibly successful. And now they come into this and they have the money, but money sometimes doesn't make the right decisions for you. In other words, you can waste a lot of money, and they've done that too in paying people off on, hires that just didn't work out. And I'm sure there was a point in time where they tried every avenue to try and get this thing right. Really, when you investigate it, they went to analytics and they got laughed at, at the initial start of it. They went to Mike, they went and brought in, different people. They brought in, different general managers. They brought in John Dorsey, and it looked like it was going to work. They brought in Hugh Jackson. They stuck with Hugh Jackson through some really lean seasons and kept bringing him back. And that was different from the years when they would hire a coach and fire a coach right away. So they explored everything until they finally hit on this. And, I think it's very rewarding for them right now. I really do. They have done a lot of interesting things with the football team. And most of all, they have kind of stayed a little bit back or farther into the background. And I think they're confident in Paul DePodesta and Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. I mean, three guys who finally, I think at the same time, Dino, are all on the same page. They're all working together. They understand each other. They speak the same language, whatever that language is that they use. They speak it, and it's fluent, and it's working. And now you see the factors that come out. And you see the payoff on this is where they are. It's really a wonderful thing to see. But it took a lot of throwing the dart at the board to see if one was going to hit.
Yeah, it was a long process, and it was cool to see. And of course, Jimmy had the mask on last night, but I was just sitting there thinking, this has got to feel so good for them to finally get to taste this kind of success. The train will keep going this week. The Browns will be in Kansas City Sunday for the divisional playoffs against the Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions. I would think that as much as it would be nice to come out and hit Kansas City like they've hit Tennessee and they hit Pittsburgh, if they can't do that and start that quickly, I would imagine, Jimmy, would not the best logic be to control the clock with your running game and keep Patrick Mahomes and company off the field? I mean, or do you just say, hey, look, we'll try to win it in a shootout, and let's have the football last? What's your approach as you look at it from afar here?
Well, what will be interesting is this. Sometimes, and we've seen a lot of examples of this, sometimes when teams get this bye week, and Kansas City got the bye week over on the AFC bracket and didn't have to play over this past weekend. So they've been sitting around, and sometimes when you come back out after that and play, and you've been off basically for 2 weeks, because really they had kind of everything wrapped up before the regular season had come to a conclusion. Sometimes you're not totally on your game. You really are not. You're a little flat. I mean, the Steelers were a little bit flat last night when they came out, and they paid the ultimate price by falling behind 28-0. Go back to 1986, or when the Browns were 12-4, and they were the number 1 seed in the AFC, and they were off. They had the bye week. They had home field advantage throughout the playoffs once they started to play. They played the Jets in their first game after the Jets won the wild card game, and the Browns came out at home with 80,000 people in the seats. The Browns were playing on an exceptionally high level at the end of the regular season, but now they're 2 weeks separated, and they struggled all game long. They really so they found a serious comeback in the late moments of the fourth, got the game into overtime, and then won it in double overtime. Sometimes that happens, and I don't know if it's going to happen with Kansas City, but it bears watching. That could be a situation that the Browns could get off to a good start because they have continued to play meaningful games. They had to win the last game against Pittsburgh, and they did. They had to win last night, and they did, and now they just kind of keep on rolling. Kansas City's been kind of sitting around, and really, if you remember their last couple of games were a little bit tighter than their games leading up to that when they were just dominating. Now, as far as it being a shootout, I think that's the way of the NFL right now. I really do. I think when you put 48 up on the board, you may have to do it again this week, and certainly against an opponent like Kansas City. I think the Browns are capable of doing that. We've seen it now a number of times. There are too many examples of them doing it to say, oh, that will never happen again. I think it's happened quite a bit this year that they can score. There's no doubt about it. And I think sometimes the new defense, Dino, in the NFL is what you're talking about, is not stopping the other team, but you having the ball, and that stops the other team. And I think that's how the Browns might have been trying to play last night, knowing that their secondary was a mess. And once the Steelers got into rhythm and Big Ben was going to go to that really short passing game, no huddle, no rest for those Browns defensive linemen. He's getting rid of the ball quickly. I think the Browns just said, hey, listen, if they're going to score, let's make them go 13 plays in 5.5, 6 minutes. Take that off the clock. But then it's important on the other end of that we go 6.5 minutes and get some points, be it a touchdown or a field goal. When that didn't happen on a couple of series in the third quarter and right at the end of the first half, that's when Pittsburgh started to really challenge and eat into that lead. So that might be the new way you play defense in the NFL. Everybody's doing it, right? Everybody's scoring. And I don't know of too many teams that really have a defense that really plays to really shut you down. I think Baltimore still tries to do it, and they did it yesterday in Tennessee. I think that to some extent the Bears try to do it a great deal with Khalil Mack and that kind of defense. But you go around, I don't think Kansas City does it. I think, they really go in and say, hey, listen, we're going to outscore you.
Right.
We have you're just not going to be able to stop us. So it really, the first thing I talked about, watch and see if they're sharp at the beginning of the game because of the layoff. And then number two, don't fear that Kansas City can score because the Browns can score too. But the best defense might be what you're saying, that if you can continue to score, make your possessions long, keep Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey and Edwards-Helaire over on the sideline.
And wrapping up, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the college football playoff championship tonight. Can Ohio State win in a shootout where everything is a shootout? I mean, Alabama's never had the kind of weapons I think that Nick Saban's got this year. Can the Buckeyes do it again?
Well, I love Ohio State as an underdog. I really do. I just think I think they play so well in that role, and I think that Clemson did all the wrong things, talking right up at the top, really at the top of the food chain with the head coach. You notice Alabama hasn't said a thing. I mean,
No.
other than Nick Saban's daughter saying something, you've heard nothing from the football team. I mean, they don't dare say a thing with Nick Saban running the show there. Football, why not? I'll be interested to see the health of Justin Fields, because Dino, last year he wasn't 100% when he played in the semifinal game against Clemson last year. I mean, he had the big knee brace on, and he wasn't himself. Now, he took a beating in that game against Clemson, so I wonder how his health, if he's okay. But why not? I mean, really, why not? I think Ohio State plays with such a physicality in a certain style of play. I mean, when they really want to run the ball, they run it physically, and they punish you defensively, and they drive you crazy because they can get first downs. I mean, it's tough keeping them from getting 10 yards in 3 downs. It really is. They're just so big and physical when they play that way. And then that mental thing of being an underdog. I like them when they're an underdog. I really do. I think, when they won the national title the last time, they were an underdog. When they won it before that, they were an underdog. I like them. When they were a favorite going against Florida, they didn't win it, right? They got blown out. So it's a fascinating game. It's a big night for Justin Fields, if I can make this last point to you, because of the draft situation.
No doubt.
And right now, figuring into that, saying, hey, listen, it seems as though there are all kinds of signs that he wants out of the Texans. He's so upset with the organization and the structure of it and the decisions that they made and the lack of checking with him on certain things when they said they were going to run things by him. If Houston gets put into a corner that Deshaun Watson says, I don't want to play here, trade me, the draft up at the top could get really wacko. Because he could suddenly become basically the first pick in the draft. I mean, he really could. He's that great. And you don't have to wonder if he's going to be great. I mean, it's not a given Trevor Lawrence is going to be great. It's not a given that Justin Fields is going to be great. Okay, but we know Deshaun Watson is going to be great. So it's a big night for Fields because he was so great in the semifinal game. And if he does it again tonight against Alabama, well, then I think a lot of NFL teams will say, hey, we can win with him.
Right. Jimmy, great stuff. Thank you so much for your time on this Playoff Victory Monday, and I'll catch you next week, my man. And we'll look forward to seeing you later on tonight, starting at 5 on What's New.
Thanks, Dino.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching Donovan and Dino right here on WKYC.com.